Mic check. Gonna start with a little mic check here, and then we'll get with the tutorial. I do not appear to be hearing myself. Alright, let's.
There we go. That's a lot better. Okay. I think we're gonna be good to start. Let's wait for the stream to catch up. So we'll begin here. So Path of Exile 2 is equal to Path of Exile 1, which I believe came out back in 2011. It is a ARPG that was inspired by Diablo 2. I've played Path of Exile 1 for about 1,000 hours, and I've been doing a lot of research for Path of Exile 2 because I'm very excited for it. Essentially, it fixes all the problems that I saw with Path of Exile 1, and the biggest one being combat, or lack thereof. So, Path of Exile 2 is an ARPG, and essentially what that means is you're gonna have to pick a character, and then you're gonna craft that character in a way where you can go around killing things, and it will drop loot on the ground. And then when they drop that loot, you upgrade your character so you can kill enemies that are harder, and you could hopefully kill them faster, which will mean more loot, which means the cycle continues until you beat everything and there's nothing else for you to do. and then you respec it to another class and try doing that in a different way. And speaking of classes, we'll start off with the warrior. First, there are well, actually, there are 6 classes, and there will be 12 at the beginning of EA, and each one has 2 ascendancies. Ascendancies are essentially subclasses. You'll get subclasses by doing specific quests. They said in Act 2. Act 2 is like the second part of the story. There's 5 parts. There's going to be 6 parts. But currently, the early access will only have availability to the first 3 acts, and then you have to repeat them, and then you get to the end game. But yeah, we're starting off with 6 classes, 2 ascendancies each. Eventually, we'll get to 12, 3 ascendancies each. And I'll talk about all of them just to give you a general gist of what it means. And we do have all the information on all of them as well, so we will know their strengths and weaknesses and whatnot. But yeah, starting off the warrior, at least all of these were advertised for some sort of playstyle, and the warrior is supposed to be the melee class, the strength class. Hits hard, bunks people in the head, and then can take a bit of damage. Now, the 2 ascendancies is the Titan. The Titan is very generic in the sense of he, well, bonks people and he stays alive. And some notes that they showed off is like more life, which is a multiplicative way of getting life. And then we also got more damage to like stunned enemies. So you'll be running around, probably taking a few good hits, and you'll be fine. And then you'll be stunning enemies, and then you'll be doing a lot of damage during that period of amount of time. Next, we have the Warbringer. The Warbringer is kind of a spiritual warrior, a little bit more on a supportive side because he gets to work a lot with war cries, which is like an AoE shout that he will scream, and himself plus his allies will get a certain buff. And he will also summon totems. We see a totem over here. The totems can do a variety of things. One that we saw is like Shockwave Totem, which is essentially put down and it does a blast. The blast pushes back enemies and it stuns them and so on. So he'll probably have more tools than the Titan, but they won't necessarily all be so simple. Next, we'll talk about the Sorceress. The Sorceress is like the box standard mage class. Cast a lot of spells, do a lot of damage, kind of squishy, but you could also play from distance. So first we have the Stormweaver. The Stormweaver is like you cast one thing and then cast another thing, and then you will be applying a lot of elements to your enemies, meaning like you could shock your enemies, making them take more damage. You could put them on fire so they take damage over time. You could freeze them so they can't move, stuff like that. Then we have the Chronomancer. The Chronomancer is like a mage that has CC. Maybe think of Zillion in League of Legends. Essentially, you're able to control the battlefield a little bit by slowing your enemies, by doing a time freeze, and also doing other things, such as reducing the cooldown on some of your skills. That way you could either increase the output of your damage, or you could use it to, once again, CC your opponents. Next is the Ranger. The Ranger is marketed to be the ranged class. Now, in Path of Exile, there's no restrictions on what weapons each class can use and what kind of build they make. And the reason that I mention this is because even though she starts with a bow, you could use a crossbow with no issues. The only thing it makes different is what kind of things you're going to want to pick out the tree, which we'll get into later. But yeah, the Rangers, two subclasses are Deadeye. Deadeye is just your box standard archer kind of thing. Um, but the biggest thing for her is she can shoot more arrows than more projectiles than other ascendancies, and she's pretty good at keeping moving despite outputting damage. I think she's pretty strong. Next, we have the Pathfinder. Pathfinder is kind of a terrorist in the sense of she will do a bunch of bombs and other concoctions and nerve agents or whatever you want to say to damage your enemies. Um, and by the way, POE is mostly a PvE game. You could do PvP, but no one really does. So not really opponents, more like enemies. But yeah. And she's also very poison focused, so she'll get bonuses to her poisons. We don't know fully how poison is gonna work in PoE 1, plus it's too complicated for this video. But if you want people to decay, to rot, maybe other pathfinders for you. Next we have the monk, and the monk comes in two variants. We have the invoker, who is basically Avatar the Airbender, and then we have what some in the community have called the chunk, which is an edgy monk. Chunk is an abbreviation of Cholula and monk, but people want to call him chunk. He's a melee dude who casts the invoker. That is, he's a melee dude who casts a lot of spells, but at melee distance and puts them on his stick, and then he damages enemies that way. He will mostly focus on lightning, ice, and I believe physical damage. And then they're very mobile. They're very much so like in and out of combat, and it's kind of like a flow with him. A lot of people really, really, really like the monk, according to Jonathan Rogers, the developer of the game. From their servers, the monk got like the highest satisfaction rate when playing. And then we have the Acolyte of Cholula. This dude essentially doesn't do magical damage. He instead does the chaos damage or void damage or whatever you want to call it. And he will have like his own specific unique resource, and he can use that resource to do certain abilities, and also to protect himself. He has pretty cool mechanics, but we'll kind of need to see how the game pans out to see if they're actually good or not. Next, we have the Mercenary. The Mercenary is marketed to be a crossbow class with two subclasses, one of which I believe is the most beginner friendly due to the fact that you can't really mess it up, and that's the Witch Hunter. The reason the Witch Hunter is good because he has very easy options of just damage that doesn't happen and the enemy can't prevent. And that makes it so you could go defensive on the tree, or you could go more offensive on the tree and just kill things really quick. But either way, it makes it so your damage scaling will be super difficult, and you might just want to focus on defenses. And it's a class that I know some of you will probably be interested in. And the Diamond Legionnaire, on the other hand, is a very generalist class. He can do almost anything, because the biggest thing he gets is the fact that he upgrades the actual skill gems that you put onto the character and makes them better than standard, which means he's not very specialized like the other classes are, but he's a generalist. So you might want to do crazy wacky things with him, and it's very it's very fluid at what he can be good at. Um, like for example, he gets three more skills as one of his ascendancy options, which means that I believe the standard is you could have like I imagine that because a mouse has three buttons and then it's five buttons on the keyboard that are your skills, and then you double that, so you get that doubled. So it's 10, so 13. So instead of having 13 skills, you will have 16 skills, which means you could do a lot more things with him. However, he'll be maybe a little bit more combo heavy focused. I will actually be talking about this class specifically a little bit more in depth in this video due to the fact that I have a build that I want to share with you guys, like thoughts behind it as I was going through it. But yeah, next we will have the witch. The witch has two subclasses: the blood mage and the infernalist. The blood mage is a spellcaster that does physical damage. So she'll be casting a spell, dealing physical damage. She pays her own life for it, and then she gets some bonuses for that. She'll probably be a pretty good health stacker as well in the game, so that's one defensive mechanic that she has going for her. I'm very interested in the blood mage. It's well, I'm interested in both of the witch ascendancies due to the fact that I usually play witch in Path of Exile. So we will see. Now, next we have the Infernalist. The Infernalist does a lot of fire damage, and she's pretty good with minions. She has a way of increasing Spirit. Spirit is a specific mechanic that lets you buff yourself or your allies or summon in minions, as in zombies, skeletons, and other stuff. And there's two camps of minions, permanent and temporary. Temporary minions will expire and won't come back. Permanent minions will, if they die, they come back after 4 seconds. And I believe it's 4 seconds. And if they won't disappear, but they consume your spirit, which is a whole different resource. The three main resources in Path of Exile are health, mana, and spirit. And we will talk about how we can manage all of those a little bit as we speak about the skill tree. So each one of those classes that we just talked about goes to a different part of the skill tree. Here's the skill tree. It's very big, but each character in the game gets the same skill tree. They did say that some of these beginning nodes are specialized for whatever class you play. So, for example, if you play Warrior, he starts over here. He will have different nodes over here than whatever the mercenary has, but that's beside the point. For the most part, most of the tree will be the same for everyone. If I'm wrong about that, please let me know. But we'll specifically start with the Gemling mercenary. So at Act 2, you'll get to ascend. You'll either pick the Witch Hunter or you will pick the Gemling mercenary. So the Witch Hunter, that's his tree. And then we have the Gemling legionnaire, that's this tree. In my case, I want to create a minion mercenary Gemling legionnaire. And so I'm gonna pick the stuff that's pretty good for him. In this case, it'll be crystalline potential and implanted gems, and I'll probably do adaptive capability and an enhanced effectiveness. We'll see. It's also possible though that I will go for gem studded. But down here we have the actual tree, and then you start looking for things that make sense for your build. For example, I plan on wielding a two-handed weapon, so I'll probably grab things here because they say, hey, increase damage with two-handed weapons. So even though he is like, hey, look, I'm supposed to use a crossbow. I have a crossbow. Please let me use a crossbow. It doesn't matter because we're just going to go over here and pick all the two-handed stuff. But let's say you did want to use a crossbow. You just look for the crossbow nodes. Let me see, like here, we have ricochet. So we might want to start with this part, which will increase our projectile damage. We'll go through here, and then we'll pick something like remorseless and increase projectile damage. And speaking of increased projectile damage, how does Path of Exile's damage work? So Path of Exile damage works this way. We start off with our base damage, and then so we have base. We'll put that as a B, and then that will get multiplied by increases, and then that will get multiplied by any multiplicative sources that we have. So your base damage will usually come from your weapon. So let's say you have 100 base projectile damage from your crossbow. Then you have your increases. So for example here, we have the 10% increased projectile damage. Let's say you get 10 of those nodes. So now your 100 damage is times 2. And that is all multipliers. So for example, uh, let's say we have something like this, Skull Crusher. 20% more damage against heavily stunned enemies with bases. Let's just pretend that was, instead of with bases, let's do crossbows, because we're talking about crossbows right now. Right, so since it's 20% more, we'll multiply it again by 1.2. And this will make it go to 200, and then this will make it go to 220. I believe. My math's not good. But yeah. The big part is increases work different than sources of multipliers. So increases will be additive. It's like a bucket, meaning that, let's say, for example, you have an increase of 20%, an increase of 10%, and then something is giving you a debuff of like 5. And that means we'll have 30 minus 5, we'll have a 25% increase. And that will go into this bucket, which means there isn't a big difference if you have 1,000% increase and let's say an increase of 800. There is a difference for sure. However, it won't be at this point. You would probably want more sources with more. But however, if you have an increase of like 15, and you get that increase over to 150, then your increase pool will be a lot stronger. And then once it's pretty strong, you want to also look for multiplicative sources. And also, like, Path of Exile 2 is a very combo heavy game, meaning that a lot of the time you're going to want to look for sources of more by comboing skills. So you might have like a skill that like freezes an enemy, and then you might have another skill that says, hey, if you shoot a frozen enemy, I did 300% more damage, right? So you just did 3 times or 4 times the amount of damage than you would have otherwise. but you need to reach that condition first. And then usually it will also say after you shoot that enemy and you dealt 4 times damage, it will consume the freeze so they're not frozen anymore. But yeah, so that's kind of how damage works. Next thing we're going to talk about is defenses. So your main line of defense, so to say, is life. Life you will get from gear, and you will get from character levels, and you also get from strength. So all of these small nodes here that have like a little plus on them, pick any attribute. There's 3 attributes in the game. It is strength, dexterity, and intelligence. And for every point that you put into strength, you get 2 health, meaning that one of these gives you 5 strength, meaning 10 health. For every point you put into intelligence, you get 2 meta. So 5 meta, 5 intelligence is 10 meta. And then lastly, it's dexterity. And dexterity is a little bit different because I believe it gives you accuracy. And accuracy increases damage with range because then your enemies are less likely to evade that damage. Yeah, so those are the 3 attributes. Um, and the other defenses are armor, energy shield, and evasion. So when you look at this tree, you really have to split it into 3 parts. There is kind of like this bottom right, bottom left, and top. Top is an intelligence, bottom left is strength, bottom right is dexterity, and then in between each one of these is a mix. So here will be like strength intelligence mix. Here will be intelligence dexterity mix, and here we will have a mix of strength and dexterity. And so each class, as I said, will start at a different part. Just to really quickly go over those parts, on the bottom here, we'll start with the mercenary. Bottom left, we have the warrior. Top left, we'll have the Templar whenever it gets added. Then straight on the top, we have the witch and the sorceress. Top right, we have the monk. And bottom right, we have the ranger and the pathfinder. And some of them can share space. So right here we have both the witch and the sorceress. Great. Let's move on to how you need to think when you play Path of Exile. I think the biggest thing about Path of Exile 2 is kind of, and honestly in Path of Exile 1 is kind of like, hey, what kind of build do I want to do? What do I want to focus on? Do I want to be running around and shooting bow? Do I want to be running around throwing bombs? Do I want to go around and do something else? That's where builds start for me, at least. And in this case, I really wanted to do a like warrior, but I have minions, and then I'm basically kind of like a Death Knight, is what I wanted to do. And so we'll be using this website called POE 2 Skills, which has all the skills that we know of so far. Obviously, we'll get more whenever early access comes out, and then the data mining will begin, and then we'll know everything, and we can really min max. Because Path of Exile is a game of min maxing. It's about, well, at least for a lot of people, it is. Because it's about getting to the late game, and if you want to get to the late game, and kill all the strongest bosses in the game, because the campaign is a tutorial. The real game starts when you get to maps, which is a mechanic, all the way towards the end, which we don't fully know how that's gonna look like. But there's some great videos about that. um, by Path of Exalted channel, YouTube channel. Now, this is the idea that I had. I wanted minions and me to kind of work in tandem in a physical damage way. So, what we have here is a build that focuses on breaking enemy armor, dealing a lot of damage, and then against really tanky opponents, smiting them down with Hammer of the Gods. But how does that actually look in game, and how does that actually look in this interface? So, in the game, you're going to have an interface that looks very similar to this. The way you get skill gems is there will be an item that will get dropped on the ground called a uncut skill gem. Whenever you do the uncut skill gem, um, whenever you use the uncut skill gem, you'll get a book. You use it by right clicking it. And this is kind of how this book that I mean looks like. So you open this book, and it will have all of these skills in them, and they can do a lot of different things. In this case, he's looking at support gems, which we will talk about as well. But all of your skills will be here on the left hand side, and then everything else that's a little bit smaller are the support gems, meaning they modify how that skill gem works. So let's, for example, say you want to cast a fireball. There's a fireball skill in the game. So let's say you want to cast fireball. So it will be fireball here, and then let's say you want to cast two of them. And then you will do like, hey, multiple projectiles. And then let's say you want your fireball to also split whenever it hits an enemy, then this will be four. And let's say our fireball should go through enemies, well, then we'll have pierce. And then let's say I want to cast my fireballs faster, then we'll have increased casting. And then let's say we want even more damage with those fireballs, then we get added fire. And what happens here is that you have fireball, and now instead of just one fireball going out and dealing damage, it's three fireballs going out whenever you cast a spell. You cast it faster, it deals a lot more damage, and it will also be bouncing around enemies, and it's great. However, all of the support gems that you just used on fireball, you cannot use on any of your other skills. The only exception with that is the mercenary, because he has this ascendancy where it says James Studded. You can use two copies of the same support and different skills. Anyways, going back. With this one, I wanted to play a melee character that's followed by minions. They deal damage, I deal damage. Some of them also tank for me and kind of play off of that. So first I looked at the tree. How possible was that with the tree? Well, looking at the tree, I noticed, hey, I want a two-handed weapon. We're going to use this. The two-handed little cluster. So some terminology that you might want to know for Path of Exile is skill tree terminology. So whenever you have like a branch or many of the skills that are together that are similar, we call that a cluster. And each cluster will have like a specific theme to it. So this one, for example, here has two-handed weapons. This one here is about shields and increasing the chance to block with your shields. Then over here we have stuns, where we are more likely to stun our enemies. And so whenever you're doing your build, look for these clusters and how far away they are from your start of the tree to see how viable your build is, because the closer you are to those things, the better. But yeah, in my case, I want to get these two-handed weapon stuff because, as I said, I plan on two-handing the weapon, and then I'm gonna get like things like mass hysteria because it gives my allies more attack speed, and my minions are my allies, so now my minions attack faster. And then here, for example, we have mass rejuvenation, which will also heal them. It will heal me. I also plan on playing in a party. This will like heal my friends when I play with them. And yeah, every single time you level up, you will get one of these points. So it will take us some points, for example, to get to battle hardened. Because let's say I want to go this way to battle hardened, it'll be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? So at level 5, that's when I can get battle hardened the quickest. All right, back to the skills. So I wanted to be a two-handed, like lich lord that has a bunch of minions running around with me, and I smack things with a big hammer, and I stun them, and I break their armor. Armor is another defensive mechanic, which will reduce the amount of damage that you take with hits. So, physical hits. So, if you're taking physical damage, armor will mitigate it. There's evasion, which will make you dodge incoming damage from enemies. However, it comes. However, it has like a decay mechanic, as in when you don't get hit, let's say like 5 times in a row, like your sixth time is almost guaranteed that you get hit. That's how evasion works. And then for the top, we have energy shield, and energy shield is essentially a second health bar that when you get hit, it will lose whatever amount you got hit for, and then it will start that health bar will start to regenerate after and that health bar will start to regenerate after, I believe, 4 seconds. So you have to go 4 seconds without taking damage, and then your energy shield comes back very quickly. Life, on the other hand, is a lot slower to recuperate. There are some ways of course, making them better, but it is pretty slow. All right, so that's defenses. But yeah, back to this build. First, I wanted to break enemies' armor. Armor breaker seems pretty good for that. What armor breaker does is whenever I hit an enemy, they will lose armor, making it so my subsequent damage will be bigger. Because in a way, after this calculation is done, it will get reduced by their armor. There's also resistances. There's 4 types of resistances, which is fire, cold, lightning, and chaos. And in Path of Exile 1, it was the standard for your character to have 75% resistances. So let's say you got hit and you had no other mitigation by like 100 damage. Then you negate 75% of that, meaning you would still take 25 damage on your health full. So it's a way that both you and the enemies can reduce incoming damage. But if I'm all physical damage and I'm breaking the armor, well, then they have no way of reducing the damage that I'm doing to them. So yeah, we have Armor Breaker for that. Then we have Bind Spectre. Bind Spectre is a very specific minion gem, which will allow us to use any enemies that we kill in battle and make them into my own puppets that I can run around with. Then we have a Skeletal Sniper. Skeletal Snipers are something that use that spirit mechanic that I mentioned earlier. And I get to summon in essentially undead archers, and they also can shoot poison clouds onto the battlefield, which is very nice. Then we have Hammer of the Gods. It's one of the few skills. Most skills in the game do not have a cooldown. Everything's like instant, except for however long it actually takes you to cast a ability, but this one has a cooldown of 24 seconds, so a very long cooldown. Kind of think like almost like an ultimate, essentially, in like League of Legends. And it'll bring down a big hammer. No one can dodge it. It says cannot be evaded, and it will do pretty decent damage. Then we have Earthquake, which is you slam the ground and then the ground erupts and deals damage to surrounding enemies. And it's pretty good at stunning. It's pretty good at clearing very weak enemies. So this will be a skill that we use quite a bit. And then we have Shockwave Totem. Shockwave Totem is you place it down and it does these blasts that stun and make enemies trip over. And once again, I'm doing all of this, which is like a lot of this is traditional like warrior stuff. A lot of this is like witch stuff. But I'm doing this with Legion Gemlin. English hard. A Legionnaire Gemling or Gemling Legionnaire. And so even though these skills were like in the commercials or like in the videos that GGG published, they were used for a very different class. That doesn't mean that you can't use them for your class. Next, we have cast on minion death. So whenever one of my minions dies, these things will set off, leading to a slew of bonuses. Now, and the way this works is because it is a meta and a trigger gem. Meta means that you could put other skill gems into this gen, and that will cause those things to happen. And then a trigger just means, hey, you need to go through a series of circumstances for this event to happen, or these gems to get set off. Next, we have another meta gem. It looks a little bit different. This one is not a trigger, so nothing, it will just always apply. As we see by the persistent tag all the way at the top. And this one is just a slew of buffs and debuffs that will always be around me, causing my enemies to not be as effective. And then lastly, we have a war cry, which is one of those shouts that I was talking about, that will kind of like make enemies more susceptible to getting stunned. All right. Now, let's talk about how I modified each one of the skills. So, Armor Breaker, I give it increased armor breaking. Hey, I wanted to break armor. Let's make it break armor better. Next, we'll do Break Endurance. So, whenever I fully break someone's armor, I get an Endurance charge. Endurance charges have a way of buffing up your other skills, as long as they are properly comboed. Next, we have Brutality support, which makes it so my Armor Breaker no longer does any elemental or chaos damage, but it does 35% more physical damage, which is very nice. And then we have Behead. Behead makes it so whenever I kill a rare monster, so let's say a rare monster had a modifier on it called Extra Life. Whenever I killed that monster with Armor Breaker only, I would get that extra life modifier for some time. And then we have Calling Strike. This basically makes my skill into an execute. So let's say that enemies are like 5% left in HP. He will get instantly killed. Next, we have Bind Spectre. So those are the minions that I summon that used to be my enemies. We have Minion Mastery. So each one of these skill gems has a level, and what the level does is it influences the base stats and the base damage of the skill. So, for example, if we go back to Armor Breaker, at rank 12, it will have attack damage of 86%, which means if my base damage is 100, Armor Breaker will take 86% of that, meaning 86 damage, and that's what it will deal to enemies. So it doesn't do full damage. And there's other skills, as we will see, Hammer of the Gods, that have really different proportions. So yeah, but back to Bite Spectre. Um, we give him a minion mastery, so we increase the gem's level, and then because it's a higher gem now, it will do the base stats of the minions that are summoned will be better. And then we give it more physical damage. I plan on using physical damage minions, and then I wanted to attack faster, and then I wanted to be a melee minion, so I'll give it close combat for more damage, and then I'll give it bleed chance so it can stack bleed on my enemies because I want to combo that with other things. Next, we have the skeletal snipers. As I said, they can summon in. They can shoot at a poisoner's arrow, causing a cloud of poison. So we have skeletal snipers. They have corrosion support, so whatever they do poison things, it also breaks their armor. And then we have multiple poisons. This makes it so they can have more poisons at an enemy, meaning more damage. Then we have deadly poisons. And they won't hit as hard with their normal attacks, but the poison that they do apply to the enemies will be better. And then we have poison chance. This makes it so every single time they attack, even without that cloud, it has a chance to poison the enemy. And then we have a bursting plague, which basically makes it so that the poisons do more damage. Next, we have Hammer of the Gods. Hammer of the Gods is that big skill that we have a 24-second cooldown on. And the biggest thing about it is it has a 1,307 attack damage percentage. So it's going to take our base damage and multiply it by that, and then it does a lot of damage because of that. And so we have Bloodlust. Bloodlust makes it so that we deal 30% more melee damage, which this is a melee skill because we can look at the tags. The tags are AoE, area effect, melee, slam, and duration. And so in this case, for us, it is a melee skill. So we get the enemy bleeding from our specters. That's why we gave the bleed chance here. And so now our Hammer of the Gods does 30% more damage. Then we have Second Wind. The Second Wind makes it so that the cooldown is 50% less. And we get to use the skill twice. So now it's on a 12-second cooldown. And we will have it twice, so we can use it twice, and then we'll have to wait 12 seconds until we can use it again once, I assume. I don't think it will be a 12-second cooldown to get 2 back. Then we have Hourglass, and this makes the cooldown longer, but we do more damage by 35%. And then we have Exploit Weakness. If the enemy's armor is broken, their armor is no longer broken, but right before we will deal 50% more damage. This makes it really, really strong to like walk up to a boss, break this armor fully with Armor Breaker, and then we drop a hammer on his ass, doing a lot of damage. Next, we have Empowered Damage, and this just gives us more damage. Next, we have Earthquake. Earthquake will be our basic horde clearing skill. We have Unbreakable. This makes it so we are less likely to get stunned when we're using this because you tend to get surrounded in this game. And this will at least make it so we don't get interrupted. Then Enduring Stuns. Whenever we stun someone with Earthquake, we'll get an Endurance charge. Then we have Devastate. Whenever we do stun enemies, we also break their armor, and that's pretty good. And then we have Impact Shockwave. And this makes it so when we stun, it does more damage. And then we have Area Effect, which makes it so that our Earthquake takes up more space on our screen, meaning more enemies hit, which means more baddies dead. And then we have Shockwave Totem. I want to use Shockwave Totem for utility, so we give it blind. Blind is something that makes it harder for enemies to hit us. I believe in Path of Exile 1, it reduced the amount of crit chance. Also, we won't really know what blind does in Path of Exile 2 until we can hover over the blind keyword and see the explanation for it. A nice thing about Path of Exile 2 is a lot of these things that are not shown on this website will have like underscores underneath it saying, hey, this is how this thing functions. Next, we'll have MAME. If I remember correctly, in Path of Exile 1, MAME slowed enemies. Then we have knockback, so this will push them back. And then we have pin. Don't know what pin does yet, so we'll find out. But it is some sort of form of CC. And then we have cast on minion death, which just gives us a bunch of bonuses. I won't go through all of them. And then we have blasphemy, which brings a lot of downsides to our enemies. And then we have seismic cry, which will make it more easy to stun enemies. So let's say you want to create a build. You could use this website. You don't have to, but I'll recommend it because that's all we have for now. And this is the thought process. First, I think of the class that I want to play and things that can go along with that class. In this case, we'll go over the Witch Hunter. And I'll read through the nodes and what they do. And in this case, I want Pitiless Killer. Makes it so I can execute enemies. That's pretty good. And I will take Judge, Jury, Executioner. Makes it so full enemies lose a lot of their HP from the get-go. So this is really good for single target damage already. Very nice. But we won't get this straight off the bat. So when you're designing this, you also have to think a little bit about the early game and going through the campaign and so on, because a lot of this stuff won't take effect until way later. Like, this is already Act 3, and then to get this to get this third one, I believe it will be like once we're in Cruel or so, or maybe also Act 3. But to get your fourth ascendancy, because you only get 8 points, so here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we're going to pick up this one, which will give us some Horde Clear, because whenever we kill an enemy, there's a 10% chance for them to explode, and then when they explode, they damage everything around them. So that is 6, because this will be 5, and then this will be 6, and then we can grab only one more. And in this case, I will be grabbing Witchbane. Yeah. Okay. So now that we have the skills here, we can. I want to be playing with crossbows. So in this case, I'll be like, what here gives me good stuff with crossbows, and then also I want good. I want to go mixed. I want to go evasion so I can dodge enemy projectiles, and then I also want some armor so those physical hits don't hurt as much. So we'll probably go for like attack speed, some more attack speed, some more projectile damage. We'll go for remorseless, giving us more projectile damage. We will look at Ordinal, and then I'll grab Ricochet. And then let's look at some clusters for crossbows. So we have a cluster over here. Close confines, maybe. I know that crossbows have a lot of shotgun skills. Okay. And I'll just kind of stop right there for now. And I'll go back to here and I'll be like, all right, let's think also about what kind of skills we want. So there's a lot of bouncing back and forth whenever you're going through the skill tree and the skills that you're using, but I know I want to use frostbolts. Yeah, I want to use frostbolts, so this is a permafrostbolt. This is a AoE, like shotgun burst. Hey, I'm gonna freeze enemies, and then I want to use fragmentation rounds. And the reason I'm using permafrost bolts and fragmentation rounds is because permafrost bolts will freeze enemies, and then I know that fragmentation rounds deal 300% more damage to frozen enemies. That's a big multiplier right there. So first I'll walk up to enemies, I'll freeze them, and then I'll finish them off with fragmentation rounds. Now I do want to freeze a lot of enemies at the same time, so here I'm gonna take a support called Pierce, and Pierce will make it so that now instead of just hitting one enemy, I'll hit the whole pack, and now everyone's frozen. And then when I kill that one dude in the front with fragmentation, it will make him explode, and that will make it so that they break apart and they damage their allies. And so we already just between these two have a combo, which is pretty nice. And then, you just keep going and looking at all the different clusters. This seems like a range damage cluster, so you might want to go like this way and grab all of this stuff. Because that increases melee damage. Maybe we want something with cold, because we're doing the cold damage, so we're freezing enemies. And so on, and so on, and so on. As I said, we're shooting at like shotgun range, so it's pretty close, so we might want to go ahead and keep going down here, picking up all of these. And there we go, we get projectile damage, we get this, 25% for projectiles to pierce enemies, which means we'll go through. So like, we wouldn't even need to have pierce support on our fragmentation rounds, but still 25% of the time our fragmentation rounds will go through enemies. Another useful website is POE to database. And the reason it's useful is because it has all the information listed, like the fact that the game comes out in 19 hours. Who's excited? I am. We will go to skill gems here, and we can be like, hey, I want to know all the crossbow skill gems. What do we have? All right, well, we have cluster grenades, we have explosive shot, we have explosive grenades, we have flash grenade, we have fragmentation rounds. Wow, okay. Let's start looking through all of these and essentially start trying to understand which ones will be the best for the build that we're trying to do. So right now we have a combo of physical damage and ice damage, and our physical damage is better whenever our enemies are frozen. So we kind of need to put that together with other skills as well. And yeah, the biggest thing you're lacking right now is the fact that the these two would have a lot of AoE, so we need something to kill enemies when they come in a lot of number. So I might look at like, there's ice shards, there's rapid shot treasure armor, storm blast bolts. These do lightning damage, don't really care about that. Permafrost bolts, those are the ones that we already are using. Incendiary shot, that just seems like one to put enemies on fire. What is ice shards? Ice shards loads your crossbow for icy bolts that rapidly fire at the ground, leaving an shard of ice at an impact location unless the bolt hits an enemy. That ice shards shatter when the enemy steps on, dealing damage to nearby enemies. So we might want to do ice shards because it seems like there's some AoE potential with this. And then it also does cold damage, so we'll go with fragmentation rounds pretty well. And now let's buff up our fragmentation rounds, since that's our main damage dealer. But honestly, before we even do that, we would probably want to buff up permafrost bolts so that it will freeze enemies better. So we already have it affect multiple enemies by having it to pierce. And then let's go ahead and do like we want to have more freeze build up. So we could do this and look for something that increases our freeze stuff. So here's what that's good: deep freeze. It makes it so our freezes last longer. Great. Then we'll go look for more freeze. And there we go. We have glassification, which will do 30% more freeze buildup against chilled enemies. So that means that we are freezing our enemies faster. And I will do like fragmentation rounds. I saw something with freeze that I liked for it when I was reading through this. And we can do um, there we go, biting frost. So whenever whenever we shoot at frozen enemies, it will make them not frozen anymore, which fragmentation rounds do anyways. But it will give us it will give us a critical hit. So now a crit is it's 2 times damage. It's 2 times damage. That's what it is. And so yeah, you just go through all of this, and you keep doing that, and you keep doing through all the skills, and then you try to combo and make the enemies weaker, make yourself stronger, and that's kind of how builds happen. I actually have a full build with this already. Well, not a full build, but just a beginner's like build for this. And so, if you would like specifically a witch hunter beginner's build, I could send it over to you. Just let me know. But that's my beginner's guide to Path of Exile 2. Hope you learned quite a few things. I kept it rather simple for as Path of Exile can get. There's a lot more depth to a lot of the mechanics that I introduced, but that's the tier crafting and the whole like the game within the game that Path of Exile is, and half of the game is just making your character, and the other half is just seeing how the character works in execution. But yeah, hope you enjoyed, and have a good one.